The Italian Radio Hour is sponsored by Istituto Mondo Italiano.
Buonasera a tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana.
E io sono Caterina. We'd like to welcome back all our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners and anyone listening online at khbradio.com. Also be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at the Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past episodes.
E io vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo. Grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana.
Well, last week we had a lively conversation with two guests. Our first guest was Lou Del Bianco, and we talked about his efforts to get his grandfather, Luigi Del Bianco, recognized as the stone carver responsible for sculpting the faces on the presidents on Mount Rushmore National Monument. Afterwards, we spoke with Michael Pauls, a noted travel writer, about the unique city of Trieste in the region of Friuli, Venezia, Giulia. Tonight, we're also going to have two guests. Our first guest will be calling in from Rome, and she is the noted chef Cristina Bowerman. Cristina is the chef of Glass Hostaria in the Trastevere neighborhood in Rome, and she's the only female chef in Rome who has been awarded a Michelin star. And in fact, I recently ate at her restaurant. In the second part of our program, we will speak with Pierette Simpson, a native of Pranzalito near Torino. She is the survivor of the shipwreck of the Andrea Doria, the luxury liner that sank on July 25, 1956, when it was struck by the Swedish ship Stockholm. But before we get to our guest tonight, let's find out the answer to last week's trivia question. Viviana, what's the meaning of moglie e buoi dei paesi tuoi?
Okay, so this expression, moglie e buoi dei paesi tuoi, I guess right now it might be a little obsolete because people travel, but this was used when maybe you married into to someone that was not from the same region of yours, and then maybe there were some misunderstandings, and people would say, well, you should have got your wife from the same town where your animal, your cattle is coming from. So definitely I'm one of those that has broken that rule because my husband is neither Italian nor American. So I think things can work pretty nicely also if your marito is not from your land. But anyway.
Well, it's quite a change, It seems like, back in the day, women were pretty much equated with property, and thankfully,
things have changed.
Things hopefully have changed. In contrast to this attitude towards women, tonight we have two very independent women with very unique experiences.
Ma prima, pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org. Well, welcome back, everyone. I'm very, very honored to introduce tonight's first guest, Cristina Bowerman. Born in Puglia, in the south of Italy, chef Cristina Bowerman is not the stereotypical Italian woman, nor the stereotypical Italian chef. After graduating in law, Cristina spent many years in the United States, where she worked for over a decade as a graphic designer for a firm that owned high-end restaurants. Realizing her passion for cooking, she attended culinary school and graduated from the Cordon Bleu in Austin, Texas. And after working in restaurants in the United States, Cristina returned to Italy and in 2006 was named chef at Glass Hostaria in Rome, where her innovative concept of cuisine has earned her the honor of being the only female chef in Rome with one Michelin star. She is the president of the Italian Association Ambasciatori del Gusto and a role model for women in a male profession. Benvenuta al nostro programma, Cristina. Buonasera.
Buonasera. How do you want me to speak, in Italian or English?
Oh, let's do it in English, but if anything comes out in Italian, I'm sure we can all deal with that.
All right.
So, first of all, thank you very much, because as usual, it's 11 o'clock for our guests in Italy, and probably you're in the middle of still having guests at your restaurant. But let's start a little bit with your background. And I think if I have done my research properly, you and I share a little special bond. Our moms are both from Trinitapoli, right?
Correct.
And I only thought that my relatives came from Trinitapoli.
My mother and my grandmother were both born in Trinitapoli. And then they moved to Cerignola, and that's where I was born.
And so I will have to do a little more investigation to see if any of our relatives maybe knew one another. So your upbringing was in Puglia, and actually your initial course of studies was in a completely different area. There was jurisprudence.
Correct. Yes, I did attend foreign languages high school. I was so passionate about foreign languages. I've always been attracted to understand exactly what people might say in another language. And I begged my dad to let me go to foreign languages high school when there were non-public. So I went to a private one. And then afterwards, I switched completely because I really wanted to become an interpreter, but I couldn't because, as a matter of fact, the only university was in Trieste. Mm-hmm. But at the time, there were problems. Maybe they they would have not received the funds from the region, so there were some doubts they would actually reopen. So I ended up graduating in law and working for a law firm for a couple of years, for 2 years. And then I went to the States, to San Francisco, and my official excuse, I really wanted to move there, honestly, but my official excuse is that I enrolled at USF, where I stayed there for a postgraduate program for like not even a year, because I was offered a job by this company that owned 16 high-end restaurants, 14 of which were Italian. And because I was the last one that came from Italy, they wanted to make sure that everything was Italian. You see, I'm sure you have experienced that. When you move to a new country, sometimes you eat something or you see something, and after a little while, the line, the temporal division line is blurred. You don't know really if you ate it there or if you ate it here. You have no idea. So they wanted to know for sure. And I ended up working for this company called Spectrum Foods for about 4 years. The company moved to Southern California, and I moved with them. So I lived in Southern California, in Newport Beach, Balboa Peninsula, best place I've ever lived. Certainly, my studio was so small that if I had my side table, I couldn't have my food turned down. But it was absolutely awesome. And right there, while I was working for Spectrum Foods, I was attracted. Actually, I discovered something about myself that I didn't know. I was attracted to creative work. My sister is an architect. My mother used to be like the artist of the house. So for me, I was always kind of limited, or I did not even honestly peek through my soul to understand if I was a creative person or not. And while I was there, in reality, I ended up asking my boss if I could just spend time in the graphic design department. And he said, of course, yes. It was also free for them, so it was just two hands more, and one brain, hopefully. And reality is that I ended up working as a graphic designer for the following 10 years. And at one point, I was kind of tired of living in Southern California because the weather was always the same. I found a city very, very difficult to live in, unless probably you were born there. I don't think it's a city that I could bear more than 2, 3, max 4 years. So I got a job offer in Austin, Texas, and that's where I moved. I had visited Austin a little while before, and I fell in love with it. And I honestly think that it was the right choice. Austin right now it's huge, but at the time was the perfect size city. You had everything. You had museums, you had exhibitions. You were not far away from great museums like Dallas or Houston or Fort Worth, for that matter. And but then at the same time, you had a live music scene that was fantastic, and a foodie scene.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that foodie scene? Because Austin is so different than the rest of Texas, where you think of barbecue, and that's about all you think about.
I know. Well, there's barbecue as well. Franklin barbecue has been, like probably the reference for everybody who wanted to learn barbecue. But Austin is a very democratic, very liberal. It's called the Birkenstock City, the laid-back city, the hippie city. So it was very different from the rest of Texas. As a matter of fact, whenever people ask where are you from, you don't say I'm from Texas. You say I'm from Austin, because it's literally different from any other city in Texas. So, for instance, right now there's so much talking, rightfully so, about restaurants that have their garden in the backyard. They grow their own herbs. They grow their own vegetables. Well, they were already doing that in Austin. Or, for instance, I'm talking about 25 years ago, 22 years ago for sure. Or, for instance, you were talking, people right now talk about organic food. Well, if you think that Whole Foods at the time when it was really everything was organic was born in Austin, Texas, then you kind of understand that people were directly already toward a healthy food, a healthy diet. So it was very interesting.
I was going to say, how was your experience in Austin such that it got you out of the front of the house and into the back of the house of the restaurant?
Well, I've always cooked. I'm Italian and from the South. So as everybody knows, in the South, you wake up in the morning and at breakfast you talk about what you're going to be cooking for lunch. And at lunch you're going to be talking about what you're going to be cooking for dinner.
Cosa c'è per cena?
Food is food is literally like, I would say the timetable or the clock of the day. It kind of like sets different moments of the day, and normal people use smartwatch or iPhones or whatever to know what time it is. Well, for Italians, it's like, okay, is it lunchtime? Is it aperitivo time? Is it dinner time? And so I've always cooked, even with my friends, especially when I went to live by myself in Austin, where it was, I would say, probably easier and closer to the Latin version of French of relationships in general. In Southern California and in San Francisco, the relationships among people are different. So friendship is conceived in a different way. Whereas when I went to Texas, it was way closer to the Italian way. So my apartment literally was like an open house on Friday and Saturday when I got off work, and I would cook. I would cook up a storm like all day, and I had a lot of fun. And in the end, I was 32 at the time, in which I realized that probably I was able to express my creativity more through food, and I felt free, than through graphic design. I think one of the reasons is because that's what I call the immediate gratification. Working in a company, I worked for Harcourt and then Riedel Severe afterwards. I had my small company of, design, but it was really small. And sometimes you're like a part of the process. So, for instance, you had to print a book. Even the cover had like 2,000 meetings to decide exactly what was right, what was wrong, and move this and move that. So by the time basically it was printed, you were already probably 2 projects. After that, you didn't even remember you did it. And in any case, it was not really your work. It was a team effort work that was absolutely wonderful. I have literally my name book printed on a lot of books that I worked with, but it was a team effort. It was never really yours. And whereas in the kitchen, it's different. In the kitchen, that's what I think attracts people more than anything else, other than the fact that eating is a physical pleasure, and nobody can deny that. But it's also emotional because you create everything from scratch. Think about it during the pandemic. I mean, you couldn't find yeast, you couldn't find flour, because people started to bake like crazy. And I think it's really related to the fact that you could see like literally from just white flour to all of a sudden it was like a baked piece of bread. And you did it all by yourself. And also you could literally like make things up according to what you have in your fridge. And it's your creative process, it's your mind at work. And nobody really can tell you this is right or this is wrong. I mean, technically, a person like me could say this is technically wrong, but in general, it's conceived as just an expression of creativity. And there's the immediate gratification because you prepare it, people eat it, and they love it. And so you feel satisfied by that.
And also, Cristina, the cooking, having the restaurant really allows you to manifest and express many other things that you truly believe in. Usually,
Correct.
from a chef, people are expecting a cookbook, but you do have a book, and too bad it should have arrived today, but didn't get it on time, where you actually give recommendations. You have these 10 rules, but what I really love is the way that you have expressed. You really combine your life philosophy with the dishes, and these are very unique, intricate dishes, but it was actually to bring people to closer to a certain type of cuisine by proposing let's actually, maybe we can dive in some of the dishes that really earn you international fame. For instance, the panino alla liquirizia, that was a major breakthrough. Can you tell us a little bit, and also what value do you associate with specifically this dish?
Yes. Let's go back a second because it's important what you said. Otherwise, it will get too long. But I will cut to the chase and tell you what I think that what I'm trying to do. Basically, arriving to the culinary world with a huge background and baggage that had nothing to do with it. One of the questions that I ask myself is like, okay, I am switching career, great. I'm going to give myself 10 years, but what am I going to really do? Am I going to just create a nice dish or a nice recipe? I didn't want that. So I have always used food to do something else. So food is the main means of, let's say, a transmission of culture. You transmit a thought or a piece of culture, a piece of your country through food. And so when I came to Italy, the recipe that you just mentioned was a major breakthrough because it kind of like made me understand exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to have I wanted to demonstrate that if you had all world culture like sheets of paper, one on top of the other, there would be an overlapping of a corner. And I wanted to find that corner. So that recipe that you just mentioned, I served it in 2006. Consider this, though. In Italy, in 2006, there were high-end restaurants and then trattoria, osteria, or fast food. That's it. Nobody has ever thought to bring, to make, high-end food democratic, because that's what I try to do. High-end food shouldn't be, just limited to people who can afford it, but you should try to make it appealing and affordable to everybody. I'm not saying that you need to lower the price at all. I'm just saying that you need to make people understand how much work there's behind it, and that once every 6 months, anybody or almost anybody can actually afford it, because it's an experience that brings you a cultural experience and emotional experience. It's something that you owe yourself as maybe, a recognition of whatever effort you made in your life. And I served basically foie gras escalope, which right now will be extremely politically incorrect to serve it, but in 2006 everything was that was allowed, as if it were a hamburger. Mm-hmm. I made fake chips of rice, and I served it with a fake ketchup of mango and a fake, another kind of ketchup that made with sauterne or some kind of wine, sweet wine that is generally served with foie gras escalope. And I made a licorice bun because licorice is my favorite.
It makes two of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I could die over licorice. I mean, it's never missing in my house. It's never missing in my restaurant. And when I said that people had to eat it with their hands, I remember at the time my partner in business, he looked at me and he said, "Are you crazy? I'm like, are you out of your mind? I'm like, we are trying to do high-end restaurants. And I looked at him and I said, but I really do want to do it. And it has been one of the most successful dishes. And people who come from the restaurants after so many years, they still remember it. So that was for me a kind of an enlightenment. I said, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to try to kind of like take different cultures and match them up in order to insert, for instance, one ingredient from another country into a traditional recipe. Think about it, for instance, oxtail Roman way. Oxtail Roman way has a very similar ingredient to, I'm talking about the sauce, to mole. And in fact, inspired by one of the most famous chefs, right now I'm missing his name, that does aged mole. I've done aged oxtail Roman way sauce, exactly like he does it with the Solera system, the Solera method. So, and the other thing that I'm trying to do is not only bring cultures together, but also to use food to kind of, let's say, support certain causes. So I volunteer for Komen, I volunteer for Yale. They are all like research, cancer research, especially female cancer research facilities or organizations. I support Fiorano for Kids, which I've been one of the founders, that support research for child epilepsy. Yes, that's right.
Epilepsy, yes.
That's right word. Exactly. The diet makes a huge difference in children that unfortunately suffer from epilepsy. And I am part also of Chef Manifesto. I just got back yesterday morning from Lisbon, where we participated and we organized a dinner for the UN conference on sustainable fish and oceans.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about your efforts in sustainable gastronomy. Can you just explain briefly, just to our listeners, what exactly is sustainable gastronomy?
Well, sustainable gastronomy is the direction that everybody has been trying to take during these last few years for, obvious reasons. Climate change, hunger in the world, the paradox of nutrition. Half of the world is starving to death and half of the world is always on a diet. There's so much waste. And also, for instance, the way that we buy food. I always say when you go to the grocery store and you buy something, in that particular moment, you actually make a political choice. Mm-hmm. You are choosing what to buy, of course, with information that are available to you, because sometimes you go to the grocery store, you think you're buying something absolutely great for the earth, for people who have worked for that product and so on, and maybe it's not true. But whenever you are aware or you're allowed to be aware, then you are making a choice. Well, for the restaurant, it's exactly the same thing. Whenever you purchase something, maybe you might be tempted to buy something that is a little bit more convenient. But if you get information, and this is our job, to gather information on how that product got to me, how it was farmed, who is the person behind all that, then I'm making that political choice, supporting what is ethically farmed. And it's not just the product, but also how, for instance, that farmer has treated his or her own employees. Because you see, in Italy, the states have this problem, but not so evident as in Italy. In Italy, especially in the south of Italy, we have a huge problem of exploitation, especially of out of Italy immigrants that are literally exploited to the limit. Sometimes you find out that they live like in 20 and 30 in like huge hungers and or huge houses that are probably not even taken care of as they should. And they are earning maybe like, 20 euros a day, 30 euros a day, but they even have to pay rent. So in the end, they work like maybe 12 hours a day, 13 hours a day to earn nothing. Mm-hmm. So it is important for us when we go to the grocery store and we or the market. And we see, for instance, I always make this example because it's very evident. And we pay, for instance, watermelon at 10 cents per kilo, 10 cents. The question that we should ask ourselves is, but if this watermelon is paid 10 cents, it's costing me 10 cents a kilo, how much money is the person who actually has picked this watermelon has made? So being sustainable is important and also covers different varieties, different aspects of the production process. In this particular case of the UN Convention on Sustainable Fish is because in Italy and also in the States, sometimes we have a very bad perception of what farmed fish should be. A little bit because the actual farming is not regulated as it should. It is not controlled as it should. And so sometimes, we have the impression that we are eating like a sort of sub-product. But the point is that we have no way out. We don't have this perception, for instance, for animals. We regularly eat, beef or chicken or pork that is actually farmed, as long as it is hopefully not an intensive farming, but we don't have the same perception for fish. Mm-hmm. But if we keep on fishing, the entire sea is going to be totally empty, and it's going to be destroyed by our actions. So the UN and the Youth Convention that was right there really what tried to create is a new narrative on farmed sustainable fish.
Mm-hmm. So appropriately doing it in an ecologically appropriate manner as opposed to unregulated fish farming.
Christina, we
not only
go ahead.
No, not only the actual fish, but also, for instance, the containers that transport the fish. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is important. Because you have styrofoam that is one of the most pollutant stuff that you can use, and everybody uses it. So I'm sorry, were you asking me a question, or you were saying that we are out of time?
No, I just say it's when we go to a restaurant, there is so much that we don't think about it. We are considering that immediate consumption, but it is so refreshing and so informative to actually listen to how you think, and so that when we come to Glass Hostaria, we know everything that is behind. It's not just what we see with our eyes, and what we're going to taste is your philosophy of life and the way that you operate the restaurant.
Yeah.
For people that want to come and visit, unfortunately, we are kind of out of time, and because we know that it's getting really late for you. For people that want to come and find you, can you tell them where you are located? And you are in Trastevere, right? Because Kathy's nodding. I've been there.
I've been there.
She's been there.
Yes.
And I will be there soon. I'm counting the days.
Yes, awesome.
So
literally the heart of Trastevere. Trastevere means across the Tiber. So it used to be like the poor people, poor people zone. And now it has become...
It's the vibrant area of...
Very much so.
Rome.
And I like it. I live here. I literally live like 2.5 minutes walk from my restaurant. In fact, I don't own a car. Ecologically correct.
Yes, good.
So I'm in the heart of Trastevere, and I've been there now. In January, it's going to be 17 years.
Wow.
And it's Vicolo del Cinque. So it is called Vicolo del Cinque because out of the little square where I am, there are 5 little streets that start, and that's why it's 5 Vicoli, Vicolo del Cinque. And you can go, of course, on Google my name, and everything will come up, or glasshostaria.it or .com. And you will find all the information in English as well. And I wanted to add one more thing. You actually got my book, but you got my first book because I published another one 2 years ago. So sorry about that. Maybe I didn't tell you, but yeah, there's another book. That
okay, we can get the second one too.
We can get the second one, and this time I'll bring it so that I can get it autographed.
Yes.
And by the way, I have to say that the meal that my husband and I had was the best culinary experience I have ever had in my life, and we're still talking about that lamb that melted in our mouths. And then oh my gosh, this tagliolini and the ravioli with stuff with the crab, and I can't even go on. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about the culinary experience.
Indeed.
Thank you.
So, Cristina, it's been a pleasure. Thank you again very much for taking time for your very busy night. Definitely, I will see you in a couple of weeks, maybe 3, and just keep on doing what you're doing, because you're really bringing the tricolore forward for all of us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ciao, buona serata.
So let's now pause for a brief commercial break.
So, applying for dual citizenship, need documents translated? Istituto Mondo Italiano provides certified translation and interpretation services in 20 different languages. Be sure to visit us at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org. Well, welcome back to the second portion of the program, and our second guest will be Pierette Simpson, a native of Pranzalito near Torino, and a survivor of the shipwreck of the Andrea Doria, the Italian luxury liner that sank on July 25th, 1956, when it was struck by the Swedish liner Stockholm. Pierette is also the author of the books Alive on the Andrea Doria, the greatest sea rescue in history, and I Was Shipwrecked on the Andrea Doria, the Titanic of the 1950s. In 2016, Simpson wrote and produced the documentary Andrea Doria, Are the Passengers Saved?, directed by Luca Guardabascio, and was shown in Pittsburgh, and that is when Pierette and I first met. Pierette, welcome to the program.
Grazie mille, Viviana, and it's good to reconnect with you.
Absolutely. Pierette, obviously you have an amazing story to share with our listeners tonight. You are from a smaller town near Torino, and can you tell our audience at what age you came to the U.S., and actually why did you come to the U.S., and who were you traveling with on the Andrea Doria?
Well, I come from a town called Pranzalito, which is near Ivrea. Most people know Ivrea as opposed to the village, which is near Torino. It's a UNESCO site, Ivrea, by the way.
Is that where they have the battles of the orange? Do they still do that? Ivrea has this very unique event. It's called the Battle of the Oranges. Sorry for the interruption,
yes.
But it's a very unique event of Ivrea.
They love it, but I've never seen it. I left Italy when I was 9.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I left with my grandparents. We were farmers. And my mother had immigrated to America 8 years before, so I literally did not know my mother. I was 15 months old when she left to create a better life in America for us. And my grandparents wanted to remain a part of my life, so they sacrificed everything. They sold their farm and animals and all their possessions, and what they could, they them in the big trunks on the Andrea Doria. And we were coming to the New World in 1956 to meet my mother and the new family that she had created here.
Mm-hmm. And the Andrea Doria was the fiore all'occhiello, the pride of post-war Italy. Yes. It was a glamorous transatlantic ocean liner, and it was defined as a floating art gallery. There was so much modern design and carried celebrities on board. And I believe their first voyage was on January 14th, 1953. And the one you were on was supposed to be their last one. Is that correct?
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
It was the last one. It was voyage 101, but there was no expiration date on the voyages.
I might have read that curiosity that they didn't want to stop at 100, so they had to push it to 101. But anyway, this is just a little detail.
I'll have to look into that. I
But
don't think so, though, but I'll look into it.
but obviously, this was a memorable, unforgettable evening. It was an evening where there was a lot of fog, and that's what the captain, Pietro Calamai, was reporting officially.
Yeah, can you give us a little bit of your recollection as a 9-year-old on this huge luxury liner? It must have been quite the experience. And what are your recollections of the events when the collision occurred?
Well, during the trip, it was fun for me, not necessarily for my grandmother, who was absolutely paranoid of being near water, much less on water. But she let me go in the swimming pool. It was the first ship to have 3 swimming pools, one for each class. So I spent my days in the pool with a young lady named Norma DiSandro, who would later pass away from injuries. And Pat Mastincola, who was my age, and he's still alive along with his sister. He saved his sister's life, by the way, because he was such a daredevil on the ship. He knew every corner of it, managed to get through the hallways in the dark to save his sister from the bow of the Stockholm piercing through her cabin and through her bed. It was just unbelievable. But it was really 8 wonderful days of a 9-day journey, and we had wonderful food, and most of the time the sea was calm, except for one day. But on the last night, when my grandmother and I decided to celebrate arriving into the New World, and we had reached near Nantucket Island. And so we were dancing and singing. My grandfather decided to be very prudent and be in his cabin below. We were in 3rd class. And keep his briefcase with him and get ready and rested for the New World. At 11:10 p.m., on a very foggy day, as you said, and foggy night, our horn was blowing every 2 minutes as prescribed by maritime law to warn other ships in the area. And all of a sudden, at 11:10 p.m., we felt this tremendous jolt, and the ship went up in the air from the right side, tilted to the left, the port side, went back to center, and then inclined drastically, almost 20 degrees immediately, which was never calculated by naval architects and marine engineers, to the starboard side. We were inside the dance hall, as I mentioned, stunned, and furniture thrown all over, people injured, screaming, lights flickering on and off. We had no idea what had happened until someone said they were outside and they had seen another ship coming at us and piercing our starboard side. And later we found out it was 1/3 within the ship and all 3 classes. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And it was a very large hole that would bring in tons of water per hour, I guess I should say, that would cause immediate beginning of sinking. Fortunately, we didn't sink right away. We had an 11-hour period where we could be rescued. So meanwhile, my grandfather somehow made his way up the stairs in water and oil and fumes-filled hallways, and rolled up his pant legs, put his hat on, he had a suit on. Most people didn't even have anything on other than curtains or whatever they could manage to throw over their bodies to make it up to the deck. And he found us in the social hall, where by this time, a few hours later, we had been sitting on the floor and praying Ave Maria, piena di grazia. Of course, at the hour of our death.
Totally chaotic.
Very different meaning. So we were together, at least. And then finally, someone came to the deck doors and announced that rescue ships had arrived. Now, this is probably 2 in the morning. Mm-hmm. Hard to know, at what time we heard that announcement, and found that we had to crawl upward in this terrible incline to try to get out the deck doors on the high side and make our way down to the lower side where the lifeboats were waiting for us. And these were lifeboats from not our ship necessarily, because on the starboard side, it was leaning so drastically that we could not get into the lifeboats. So people had to either be lowered by ropes like me, or jump into the ocean like some people did, or make it down a rope on their own accord like my grandparents did, even though they were so scared of water. And we made it into the lifeboat below. On the other side, the port side, the lifeboats would not be lowered because the incline was so steep that they had never been designed. The davits had never been designed to release the lifeboats into the water. So people were just waiting there for hours in the dark, hoping for some kind of mercy. And fortunately, there were brave people who lowered us. There were brave sailors who came from the Ile-de-France, even from the Stockholm, which was the ship that collided into us, broadsided us. And the Coast Guard, naval training ships, fruit freighters, sailing ships. It was just an amazing sea rescue, called the greatest sea rescue in peacetime history.
Now, obviously, the facts that you're sharing with us, in this very calm voice, and we really appreciate it, because I'm sure, again, it must have been screaming, probably even limbs and blood, all that things that you would associate with a shipwreck. And it was indeed the greatest rescue in history. Obviously, there is also the part of the litigation and the determination of fault that went on for quite some time. What do you know about what went on to determine? We know now, but for all those years, an investigation.
Well, that's the very complicated part. It didn't go on long enough as far as the Italians were concerned, the captain and the crew, etc., because most of them never got to testify, or if they did, it was for a very short time in the courts of New York. What is very interesting is that both ships filed suit and accused one another of fault, and the same insurer for both ships was Lloyd's of London. Pretty hard to fight Lloyd's of London and any decisions they make. So there were hearings, but there was never a trial. And the officers and the captain complained later that they did not have a chance to speak. And the Italians did not know English, where the Swedish people did, the Swedish captain and crew. So when they testified, they could, be understood, whereas the Italians were relying on a translation that was not necessarily accurate. So the survivors and families of the deceased, 46 of them, on the Andrea Doria, 5 on the Stockholm. But the 46 passengers of the Andrea Doria's families were filing. They were listing their loss of belongings, loss of life, as was requested by the Italian line, by the courts, I assume, and they were sending them in, and the amounts were staggering. So Lloyd's of London made the decision that there was just not enough evidence to decide who was at fault, even though all the evidence was available. The course recorder was really all that was needed, and human testimony and witnesses. But that's what was decided. So we had to abide by, I think it was $85 million that we were claiming in loss of life and property.
Mm-hmm.
We got $6 million and had to divide that up among all of the people, the claimants. So basically, there was never a fault assigned. And later, not much later, Alvin Moscow, an author, New York Times journalist, wrote a book called Collision Course, and he wrote it while in Sweden at the invitation of the Swedish government and the Swedish line, and it was definitely not favorable toward the Italian crew and captain. As you know, and you explained very well to me when you wrote that you understood that the Andrea Doria was meant to be the symbol, the icon of Italy's resurgence from the ashes of World War II. So we had a really hard time making ourselves be in a good light. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Moscow realized that Italians had the reputation of being cowardly, World War II, Mussolini, the mafia, et cetera, whereas the Nordic people were seen as rational and courageous and detailed, et cetera. So it was not obvious, but implied very heavily in Collision Course, the book, who was at fault, even without, stating this is who was at fault. But that sealed public opinion for years until the next book was written, and then the next book was written, which were basically very similar to one another.
Am I correct that at some point, and we're coming also close to the end of the program, that actually Pietro Calamais was indeed clear of any accusations, but he is one of those captains, whereas the Swedish captain eventually went back to sea, but Pietro Calamais never sailed again, where he was cleared of any possible responsibility in a letter that he actually never opened before dying.
Yes. There was a naval engineer named John Carruthers who did the research along with Captain Robert Mern of the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. And by that time, in the 70s, they had developed a computer simulation at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy so they could put human testimony and all the scientific details within this KORF, this computer simulation, and come up with a plausible explanation of what had really happened. Before that, there was no evidence of what had happened. So the authors of the 3 books that I mentioned earlier simply wrote what they had heard, what they had read in the newspapers, and it was not based on science. So unfortunately, these 2 gentlemen did have evidence that cleared him. However, the captain never got it because he died 2 months before they arrived in Genova to show him the proof that they had. When I found out that the Captain Byrne of the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy knew what had happened and that it was never published to the public, and I was part of the public that was blaming both the Stockholm and the Andrea Doria, I was furious. I couldn't believe that a whole country and the whole marine industry had really been, put a
defamed,
a
basically,
on
right?
them, stain on them, exactly.
Yeah.
And no one was going to clear them. Well, I had been a language teacher for 37 years, and I decided that I was going to become an author and clear the captain and the crew's names. So that's when I wrote Alive on the Andrea Doria and later made the film, because this was just injustice against Italians. It was injustice toward the truth of what had really happened. And it was, like you said, a stain toward the maritime industry where it should have been a glorious trip, another glorious trip, 101, that made Italy look like they were great master mariners and shipbuilders.
Indeed. Pierette, we are actually out of time, and I do recommend everyone to actually follow Pierette both on her website but also on her Facebook, because there is actually a new exhibit that I just opened up a few days ago at the Noble Maritime Museum, the Andrea Doria Rescue at Sea, that has a lot of artifacts from the life ring to the ship's brass bell to underwater footage of the diving team recovering to 1,000-pound ceramic mural panels by Italian artist Guido Gambone. So please do follow Pierette Domenica Simpson, and you will see footage. Also, the documentary was just spectacular. Pierette, it's time for us to say goodbye for tonight, but I do hope that our paths are going to cross again. Maybe you'll come back to Pittsburgh for a second time.
Yes, that would be great. Or maybe we'll meet on Staten Island at the exhibition.
Benissimo. That sounds like a great invitation.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you so
and
much,
Todd
Pierette.
Boyer's exhibition of his artifacts that he recovered himself along with the help of cover divers is there. And we really would love the public to go there and see what masters the Italians were in so many domains.
Well, grazie mille again. And unfortunately, our hour is almost up.
And il Big Ben ha detto stop. Buona serata, Pierette.
And it's time for us to say arrivederci and alla prossima. We want to thank you all for tuning into the program. If you have any questions or comments, please contact us at the Italian Radio Hour at gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Who will be our guest next week?
Well, our guest will be Mary Meniti, founder of the Italian Garden Project, Rosetta Costantino, author of the cookbook My Calabria, who has an extensive Calabrese-style garden, Michaela Smith, the director of the documentary Heirloom, and the conversation is going to be about the importance of growing a vegetable garden in Italian-American culture.
And remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, please visit our website at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org and click on the Italian Radio Hour tab.
Vorremmo ringraziare le nostre ospiti Cristina Bowerman e Pierette Domenica Simpson, il nostro sponsor Istituto Mondo Italiano e la Boara per la Musica. Finally, before we leave, here is our trivia question for next week. What does come il cacio sui maccheroni mean? Again, what does come il cacio sui maccheroni mean? You can send in your answer to the Italian Radio Hour at gmail.com.
And remember, if you are not living in the Pittsburgh area or you might be out of town, remember you can catch us streaming live at khbradio.com every Thursday at 5 p.m. And be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at the Italian Radio Hour. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
The Italian Radio Hour has been sponsored by Istituto Mondo Italiano.